how to find lost ancestors, lost family trees, and get second citizenship by descent. I personally have clients who have gotten German citizenship, Italian citizenship by proving that their ancestors, their great-great-grandfather, took a boat from Germany to the United States. They were able to prove that and get German citizenship for free after a couple of years. Maybe your family has told you, oh, we're half Greek, but are you really? How do you prove that you're actually half Greek? And how do you find the record so that you can then apply for Greek citizenship or for whatever citizenship? You might get an amazing second passport for free by proving that your family actually comes from that country. And we're going to use Ancestry.com. Now, this is not sponsored. They didn't pay me for this. This is legitimately how I found out my family tree and how my clients have gotten second citizenship by finding the records of their ancestors. Now, I recently did a DNA test. It shows that I'm 53% Spanish, specifically from the Basque country in the north of Spain. It borders France, close to Andorra, and my family's originally from there. That's where my ancestors come from. Now, unfortunately, I can't apply for Spanish citizenship by descent because they only do it if your grandpa is from Spain and you can actually prove it. It turns out my great-great-grandfather is from the Basque country, so unfortunately, I can't prove that I can get Spanish citizenship. But what if you can prove that you're Italian, that you have Italian ancestry? My client David was able to prove it by using Ancestry. He did a DNA test and then he was able to find that his great-grandfather was born in Italy, and he even found out that his great-grandfather never naturalized as a US citizen. He moved to the US, he had children in the US, but he never naturalized as a US citizen because on the records in Ancestry.com, it said that this person is an alien instead of a citizen. And that means that because the great-grandfather never naturalized, David, multiple generations later, is able to claim that Italian citizenship. Italian citizenship by descent claims need to show an unbroken chain of citizenship. And this is how it usually works for most citizenships by descent. But how do you actually prove that it's unbroken? Well, you can check the records inside Ancestry.com after doing your DNA test and then match everything and show that you actually deserve to get that Italian citizenship. Now, once you know your specific percentage, maybe you're 50% from Norway, and you actually find that your grandpa is from Norway and you can actually prove it, does the country even allow you to get citizenship from that country? Because, for example, France, there's a lot of people with French ancestry. France only allows it if you can prove that your parents are French. So if your grandparents are French, but if your parents are not French, your parents would need to apply for citizenship based on their parents, and then you can apply for citizenship based on your parents. But if it's, for example, your great-grandpa that was French, and there's no connection down to your parents, then unfortunately you can't even apply for French citizenship by descent. So the first step, do a DNA test, find the census record, find who your ancestors are through Ancestry.com, and then check if the country that you're applying for even lets you apply for citizenship by descent. And then once you find out that they do let you apply for citizenship by descent, then start hiring agencies and companies that can help you do this. Usually agencies will charge between $8,000 to $15,000 to compile all your documents to actually apply for that citizenship. In some cases, you will need to learn some of the language, like Hungarian citizenship by descent. They make you learn some of the language, they make you know some of the history of the country, and then you can formally apply. And in some cases, it can take up to 7 years to apply for a second citizenship. I personally have a friend that I mentioned before from Germany. He was born in the US, his parents, his grandparents, everybody was born in the US. His last name is German, and he was able to prove that his great-grandpa came from Germany all the way to the United States on a boat, and he was able to get German citizenship, but it took him 7 years. It was free. It's an amazing passport, but it took him 7 years to get. So you might be waiting almost a decade to get that second passport. Now, another thing that I love about Ancestry.com, as I said, it's not sponsored, just helping you out getting a second citizenship, is that it shows you the community where your ancestors are from. So in my particular case, my ancestors came from the north of Spain, from the Basque country, and they settled in countries in Latin America, like Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Mexico. They came from that region, but they started settling there around 100, 150 years ago. So Ancestry was able to match my DNA to ancestors that came and settled in Latin American countries. And then you can start digging through there because, for example, let's say your ancestors are from Luxembourg, a small country, great passport. low taxes, but you can't necessarily prove that they came from Luxembourg and then they settled in Florida. But Ancestry can show you that your ancestors are part of a community which settled in southeastern United States from Luxembourg and France, which can give you some clues. Okay, I know that I'm 30% from Luxembourg, 30% from France, from that area, and then I know that they settled in Florida, specifically in southeastern United States, so somewhere around Florida. Then I can start looking for records in those places from whatever year Ancestry says. Maybe Ancestry says from 1825. So starting in 1825, 200 years ago, I can start looking for records that my great-great-grandparents moved from Luxembourg all the way to Florida. And then maybe in Florida, I can find the records of those Luxembourgish citizens, and then I can apply for Luxembourg citizenship by descent. So Ancestry gives you a ton of data that you can use basically for, I think, $300, $500 that I paid for it in order to apply for an amazing second citizenship. Now, just to show you another example, because I did this test on my girlfriend as well, who is half Russian, half Latina, we actually found out that her ancestors come from a Jewish community from northeastern Europe, in this case from Lithuania and Latvia. So if we put the documents together and we actually put a complete file, and we can show that her ancestors were Jews from this particular place, specifically from Vilnius or from Riga, she could actually get a Latvian or Lithuanian passport based on this information. And this is things that they didn't even know. Her family didn't even know that they come from a Jewish family in northeastern Europe. So it can tell you a lot about your ancestors that you had no clue about. If you want to get a second passport and a second citizenship, but you want to do that without investing in a country, with actually spending time in a country, what are the countries around the world that will give you the fastest citizenship? You can check them out right here. The fastest countries in the world to get a second passport without an investment, check them out right here.